you to share the.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our session. So my name is Megan. I'm with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and I'm your host for the evening. And so I'm welcomed by a lovely group of panelists, a gentleman for the evening's presentation. I have one screen to share for you as we get started. And know that, so the first thing is that how do you ask questions? The Q&A is located at the bottom of your screen. And so you can ask any questions that you have for our panelists and their respective institutions. So please feel free to ask questions as we go through the session. Your camera and microphone is off. Now, we cannot hear or see you, but you can see us and hear us as well. But know that your camera and microphone is off for this evening's presentation. You can sign up for more sessions at IACAC.org, just like you did today. And then the session is being recorded. So if you're like, hey, I'm not sure what they said, or you wanted someone's contact information, you can absolutely come back to the recorded session and see what you need to. So have a great presentation, gentlemen, and I will stop sharing my screen and you are all set.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Megan. So welcome and good evening. Welcome to this session, which we've entitled Test Run or Test Done, discussing test optional admissions. I'll tell you, we are oddly and enthusiastically excited to talk about this topic, considering everything that's happened in the country related to test optional admissions, test blind admissions announcements. You are actually having a conversation and hearing from 4 leaders of various institutions located throughout the country of different sizes, compositions, some characteristics and traits that make us different, and very much some things that make us similar. My name is Quentin Clay. I'm the Director of Admission at Northern Illinois University, and I'm excited to join this conversation with 3 good friends and very knowledgeable fellows who will contribute to this conversation. We look forward to your questions. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. We'll get to as many as we can. Send those right away. Don't wait until the very end. Just populate us with those questions here, and we'll make sure that this is a vibrant discussion. But again, thanks for tuning in. We look forward to taking this journey with you.
You want us to go alphabetically down here, or yeah, let's do that. Is this live? Are we on?
You are on, Ken. We hear you. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect.
Well done.
I don't have that green box like I usually do.
Game on. All right. I'll grab the ball next then. I'm Ken Anselment. I am, according to this slide, apparently the Vice President for Enrollment Communications everywhere. I have no institution. It's because I'm across the cheese curtain, on the other side of the cheese curtain. No, don't change it. It's fine.
I'm going to change it.
No, don't. I'm on the other side of the cheese curtain up in Wisconsin, at Appleton, Wisconsin, to be fair, just for geography's sake, just about 25 miles away from where these guys play. That was for you, Quentin. Thank you. But I'm at Lawrence University, small liberal arts college, about 1,500 undergraduates, nestled in the heart of Appleton, Wisconsin, a land where dreams come true. And so let's see, I'm going to toss it to Devon. Since Devon is off mute, you go next.
Oops, sorry, I forgot about the mute. So my name is Devon Urals, Director of Admission at Knox College. I was trying to get the title of Jedi Master, but it wouldn't fit on the screen. We had to take off Lawrence University, that's why. So again, so happy that we can't see any of you, but you can see all of us. So again, keep those questions coming. We're looking forward to chatting with you about test optional. So thanks for being here. And then DJ.
Good evening, everyone. I actually was the last one to be able to join this esteemed group. It's kind of like being that last player being picked to play kickball. So I'm happy to join it and to be a participant here. I'm Vice President of Enrollment at Susquehanna University, which is in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. We've got about 2,300 undergraduate students at a liberal arts institution.
There we go. So love way around. So let's get this conversation started.
All right. So one of the things I want to make sure that we recognize is that we will touch on all of these points. Some of them may be combined within slides just for ease of navigating through the conversation, and also trying to make sure that we leave enough time for you all to engage with the questions that you have. And we'll make sure that we spend time appropriately facilitating the questions as well. So I'm going to kick us off with talking about the overview. And while I'm talking about the overview of the admissions process, we'll also within it reflect on some of the various parts of the college admissions application. And then my other esteemed colleagues will speak to the reference to the movement towards a change in test score policy. Do I or do I not submit my scores? And then I also think broadly about what the future may hold for standardized tests, whether we're talking about currently within the pandemic and how long that global health pandemic lasts, or even post-pandemic, what will that future hold and what will it look like as it relates to test scores? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to make sure to connect with you all on, and to my esteemed colleagues, feel free to chime in if I've missed anything, is regardless of if an institution that you have within your search pool requires scores or not, there are still parts of the process that you can take ownership of. You should be in the driver's seat as it relates to your college search journey. It doesn't mean that you won't have a support system around you. It could be parents, guardians, it could be your school counselor, it can be the representative at your community-based organization, it could be great colleagues that work in our offices to help support you throughout your journey. But nonetheless, you are in the front seat, the driver's seat. So first and foremost, be mindful of thinking critically about your passions. What are you truly passionate about? What are you interested in, and what goals do you have? As you start formulating those pieces, those seem to be the three-legged stool of kind of kicking into what you're looking for in an institution, or institutions plural. And as you transition from there, you start thinking about your needs plus your priorities, or another way to say priorities is your wants. So you may need, for example, just based on your specific situation, you may need specific resources offered in student disability services. You may need certain resources from a counseling center perspective. You may have a specific focus on a certain academic program. So those may be within the realm of needs, but you may want your school to have a rock climbing wall. You may want your school to have Pepsi versus Coke products. So there may be some variation across some of those things. And yes, I would be the person that would need Pepsi products at the campus. As you transition from shaping your passions, your interests, your goals, and then your needs and priorities, then comes you plus education. And what I mean by that is you are now in the position to start researching those institutions, confirming that they do have the academic programs, that they do meet most of the things that you have on your passion, interest, and prioritization list. And that also, while you're doing that investigation and that research, you're also confirming what that institution may be looking for in their applicants, whether it's academic profile, whether it's experiences and attributes that they're looking for those students to come and add to the campus community. And in many ways, outside of looking at the admissions content, you also get a sense of what they're looking for from their mission statement as well. And then you can ask yourself, is that the type of environment you want to contribute to? Is that the type of environment you want to be a part of? And is that the type of environment you want to grow not only academically, but also as a human being? One of the key aspects that I think is important, and the timing of that conversation is important, and the frequency of this conversation is important, is thinking about the ability and or the willingness to contribute fiscally to your education. When you think about the higher education context, we do see it, and maybe I'm speaking for myself, but I believe my colleagues would agree, we do see it as a public good versus a private good. But within that realm of conversation, every institution isn't in position to meet everyone's need. And depending on how you perform academically, you may or may not qualify for a variety of academic scholarships, depending on the type of institution you are applying for. So it is critical for you to have that conversation early and often with your support team to have a sense of how you're going to be able to contribute to the cost of your education. And have that in mind as you start shaping your list. And that way, as you get and receive offers of admission, which we're sure you will, that once those financial aid notifications start coming out, the shock value isn't there. You aren't up high on the top of a Christmas tree with the star because you got admission, but then brought down to where the presents are because you're not in a fiscal position and you didn't have that conversation. And hopefully all of those things lead to an educated and informed decision that you and your family not only are comfortable with, but you feel like you're going to be able to thrive with as you transition into your post-secondary experience. So transition down to talk about decision plans. I want to make one quick reference that I picked plans that are kind of typical that we see on a more frequent basis. There is a plan that I did not include, which is known as restricted early action. Again, there are a few schools across the pecking order that do use that option, but not many. And so I wanted to make reference to those that are plans that we may often see. Early action tends to be programs that may have anywhere from an October 15th to a November 1 deadline in many instances. And then they provide decisions to you sometimes between that November 1 deadline and through December 15th, depending on what their process and their program is. But you still, in theory, would have until May 1 or whenever that decision deadline is for that school year to make an informed decision. Early decision is the one within this group that is a binding decision, assuming that the fiscal realities of that process work for you. And obviously, every institution does not have an early decision option, but within early decision, typically the student is raising their hand to say, if I am extended an offer of admission at this institution and the fiscal realities work, that is going to be my institution of choice. It allows you to kind of confirm and make that decision much earlier in the process. Many institutions that use that program and that process often communicate, as you see on their websites, like, here are the types of students that may seek out this option. And so as you're shaping your college search list, if that college truly is your number one choice and you really see yourself being there, that may be an option. Some schools have variations of early decision. There may be multiple rounds of early decision 2 as an example. But again, just trying to communicate and articulate what those options may be. Regular decision tends to be a little later in the process. It can be anywhere from a January 1 to a February 1 or February 15th. And typically, again, those decisions roll out on a specific basis, sometimes through the end of March, maybe early April. And again, with that notion that you, in theory, have until May 1 and or when that decision timeframe is for that year. And I say that because we just came off a year where a portion of schools moved to a June 1 deadline, being mindful of the pandemic. And so, again, thinking through that. And then there's rolling. And rolling is once they start receiving applications, they roll decisions out on a rolling basis. And so as soon as a student gets their information in, that institution may have a practice with an admission committee that can turn those decisions around relatively quickly. And again, all of those are options in addition to the restricted early action option that I referenced. I'll pause because I've been speaking for a little bit and see if my colleagues have anything to add on decision plans or managing the search before I touch base on holistic review.
I'm eager to hear about holistic review, DJ.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's
man.
hard to not get audience feedback, right? So we'll be the audience feedback. Come on, DJ, you got this.
All right. So just transitioning to holistic review. When you really start thinking about schools, the notion of holistic means whole. It means, in theory, we're trying to look at the whole student and everything that the student brings to the table. And that is based upon the various things that each institution may require or have as options for submission to the application process. And so as I look at some of these attributes, you think of one, the academic metrics. Traditionally, that includes the transcript. And again, how has one performed over a period of time? Typically, when you start submitting your applications, most institutions will be able to see through your junior year. Depending on the system at your school, they may be able to see as early as the first quarter, depending on the type of system your school is on. And then test scores may or may not be included, depending on that institution's process. I'm mindful that we do have a colleague here that has a test blind process at his institution, or test free, which means they do not even consider the score. So you want to be mindful of what those schools do require and how they look at those things. Experiences and attributes. There's options on applications for you to kind of identify the things that you spent your time on beyond the academic experience, beyond the classroom. So whether that's, being a girl or boy scout, whether that's in relationship to you being in a band or performing in theater, whether that's you a membership in a club, getting to secretary of the club, and then at some point being the president of the club. Or maybe there are other things that you're doing. Maybe there are things that you have to spend your time on doing differently just because of your situation and your dynamic. Maybe you're spending time doing amazing work raising your siblings. Maybe you're coming home from school and spending time taking care of elderly grandparents. Again, there are a variety of things that we can pick out, and everybody's situation is not going to be the same. And so we are all thinking critically about what you share, how you share it, and in the context of your environment, how you utilize that additional time that you may or may not have to do these other things and to contribute and to serve. The other piece is the value contribution. Once we get a picture of the academic component, once we get a picture of your experiences and their attributes, we are also thinking about how you may add value to our campus community. Sometimes it may be challenging the status quo. Maybe you have a background in activism and positively protesting for the things that need to change and that you see need change within your community and your environment and things around you. Maybe it's that you will contribute from an athletic standpoint. Maybe it's because you've already started doing your own research independently even before you transition to college, and you may look to do collaborative research with faculty once you transition to that next destination. And maybe you have a background in the spirit of entrepreneurialism. And so maybe you may look to be a starter in a variety of ways in that campus community. So we are paying attention to that within the context of the application. The other piece I would reference is your demonstrated interest. Now, demonstrated interest could come in a variety of ways. And so again, I want to recognize that I'm not trying to speak for all institutions when I reference some of these pieces, and some of these pieces may show up in different categories. But obviously there's anything from being able to visit campus, if that campus right now is in position to have visitors, how you engage virtually, whether you're attending a virtual tour, a virtual panel, meeting with the council virtually, or connecting with students virtually. Maybe it's an opportunity to do an interview, and maybe that's an interview with the actual admission staff. Maybe it's an interview with an alum, but being able to contribute in that fashion. And again, interviews may show up in other categories that I've already named before. It may not necessarily be a demonstrated interest category. And so those are just some various ways of which you are able to demonstrate and show your interest. And then the last piece I referenced, and I said it 3 times just to make sure I was clear with myself, is context. There are a variety of things that we can see, but the more we get context on your application, the better we have to truly make a holistic decision and to make an informed decision. For the group that's here, you know, we aren't necessarily gatekeeper institutions. I would probably safely assume that we are all north of 65% of an acceptance rate or somewhere near it. So we are looking for ways to admit you, but we're also responsible for confirming that we truly believe that you have the ability to be successful with or without support. And so those are things that we're trying to think critically of as we're making that decision. The last piece I'll say before I kick it over to my colleagues is the essay is another piece that can come through in a variety of those categories. It could be through an academic metric because the school may be paying close attention to your grammatical approach to how you write, how you put together your thoughts, how you flow within your communication. And in many instances, it's not necessarily saying that we're looking for the same story or various stories, but thinking critically about how one writes and their ability to transition to the competitive writing environment that their college may provide. So I'll pause and kick it over to any colleague that has any reference point or additions to add, or we're transitioning to kind of the change in our space based on test optional policies.
Thanks, DJ, for teeing all that up. I was watching the questions come through, and we have a question from one of our friends, Annalie. Thanks for your question. Before we move on to testing, it seems like it'd be a good moment to weigh in pretty quickly on this one. And the question is, if you choose to apply early decision, should you know ahead that you can afford to attend the school, or at least get a sense of what the cost is going to be like? Furthermore, the student says, the guest says, I don't anticipate receiving need-based funds, but my college savings won't cover a couple of my top stretch schools. So, and who all has, I know we've got ED at Lawrence, you've got it at Susquehanna, and you got it at Knox, okay. And feel free to weigh in, colleagues, on this, but one thing I'd encourage you to do, at least in the early going, Annalie and others, is to take a look at a college's net price calculator. It's not the most accurate tool in the world. If you fill it out, it may not give you exactly what the cost is going to look like. I usually advise students that it's more about direction than precision, but it can give you a sense of maybe how much closer to the expected, how much closer to your ability to pay that college's aid award might look like. Also, if I had $1 for every student that said I wouldn't qualify for need-based funds, I could probably fund most students who are applying to our colleges, because there are a lot of other tools available. So I encourage everybody, even if they don't think they're going to qualify for financial aid, complete the process, because you might be surprised with what a college can come up with. At the very least, applying for financial aid allows a college to be able to use more tools than just merit-based scholarships to help make the educational opportunities more accessible. You may have loans, which aren't the most exciting things in the world, but they are helpful leveraging tools to make what can be an expensive operation look a little bit more accessible. But you might surprise yourself and turn out to be eligible for campus grants or student employment. So take the shot. I don't know if it was Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky or Michael, oh my gosh, it was you, Quinn? You miss 100% of the shots you never take? Anyway, I think that was also referred to in The Office and misquoted. So, but anyway.
People that you named, Ken, in Star Wars?
What's that?
Were those people you just named in Star Wars?
Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky, yes.
Were those Star Wars characters?
Yeah, otherwise you didn't understand that.
I just wanted to make sure I noticed. I remember those. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Dylan.
Yes.
And thanks, Annalie, for your question. Let's take a look at this other one. Oh, haha. And this one is going to tee us up for our next session. We've got a question in here about ACT scores and SAT scores. So, Mike, before we get to that question, let's see if we can tee up the rest of this part of the show. We'll answer it in due time. We might even actually get it correct. So one of the questions that we know we've been getting is, why are colleges changing their test policies? You may have been seeing the news about how many colleges, and I think we've got a slide coming up a little bit later that shows just how many colleges have gone test optional or test blind in the past, just in the past year. Lawrence is one of the old kids on the block, along with Knox. We've been test optional long before the cool kids picked up on this movement. Lawrence went test optional back in 2005. That was back when the SAT started adding the writing component to the test. The reason we went test optional is the reason a lot of colleges have gone test optional in the past, and I'll use a narrative to explain it. If this applies to you, this little piece of dialogue, I'm a really great student. I take great classes. I've done really well. I am just not great at taking standardized tests. We hear you. That's why so many colleges have gone test optional. When you have an industry that generates more than $1 billion in revenue to help students prepare to succeed on a test that you're not supposed to actually be able to prepare for and study for, tells you there might be something a little bit wrong with the system. We work for colleges that like to be student-centered enterprises and make sure that we're having students that are coming through an admission process sane and with plenty of gas left in the tank to do all the hard work we're going to ask them to do once they get to our campuses. And as far as I know, I don't think any of us ask our students to take a standardized test once they get to our classes. They're not filling in any bubbles or doing anything like that to write an English essay or anything else like that. So test scores, when Lawrence went test optional back in 2005, and Devon, I think, probably went through the same sort of thing at Knox, we had found that test scores added very little predictive value in the process. We knew what we needed to know about a student's ability to be successful based on the sort of courses she's taken in school, how well she's challenged herself, how well she's done in those classes, and all the other things that DJ was talking about with what makes up the rest of the application. Test scores are fine, but they don't add a whole lot more in our ability to judge whether a student is going to be successful at our institution or not. Now, over the past year, actually even less than the past year, over the past 6 months, a lot of colleges have gone test optional or test blind because students don't have access to tests. This may apply to you. You may have had a test that was canceled. You may be faced with the prospect of having to drive 3 or 4 or 5 hours to try to sit for a test. And I think you had a whole bunch of colleges saying, enough, let's just take a break. Let students focus on the things that matter most. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting year and couple of years where the value of standardized tests is going to be really under scrutiny because we're all going to be making decisions without them. So what's fun about this, it may be a little unsettling if you're a student, but what's fun about this is that we're all in this together, trying to figure this out together. So you get to be the trailblazers this year and help us figure out how to make this work. But for us and for every college that's making this decision, it's really about giving students a break and putting students at the center of the process. Colleagues, do you have anything to add on that before I kick it over to, I think it's Devon? Are you next? You're next? Okay.
I would just reference Susquehanna was in a similar boat to Lawrence and Knox in the sense that we've been test optional for over 10 years. And I think one of the interesting conversations that I was able to have with the admissions team was concerns about even for those that do have scores. NACAC came out with a white paper from that ad hoc committee that they put together on testing.
DJ, what's NACAC?
The National Association for College Admissions Counseling. Thank you, Ken. And in that white paper, one of the interesting things that my team kind of gravitated towards was this notion of how many, the percentage of students that often have a chance to take the test over, to take it again. And so it wasn't just about those that couldn't test at all. It was also about those that may have tested before and they may feel like their scores are strong and should be used for the admission decision. But what if they would have had a chance to take it later? So within our review process this year, it's not simply are they applying with the test or not. It's also being critical about thinking through when did they take the test, and to not allow that to penalize the student either if for whatever reason they wanted those scores considered, to think critically about when they took the test. And if it has been a longer period of time where they could have had a chance, given normal circumstances and a normal environment, to retake, we don't want to penalize the student in that regard either. And so we've also thought differently about how we are scholarshiping. And so we're not using the score in any way that would be a negative for those that have submitted scores, because we're mindful of all these other things where they may not have a chance to have retaken it, and or the score may be a couple months old, to say the least.
All righty, I'm going to jump in there too now. So welcome back, everyone. Devon Urls at Knox College. Excellent remarks from my colleagues, DJ and Ken. And so let's just jump into a couple of these questions. So the question prior, why are so many schools going to the test optional piece right now, I think was already brilliantly answered by DJ and Ken. So this question now, should students submit their test scores if they have the option? So I'll weigh in here. So when it comes to schools that are test optional, first, let's just kind of define what does it really mean? What is test optional? Does this mean that we hate tests? Does it mean that we don't like them? They shouldn't exist? No, it just means it's an option. That's exactly what it means. It's right in the title, test optional. Now, which is, again, you have some schools that are test blind. I know Quentin will chat a little bit more about what the test blind option is as well. But it's up to the student whether you feel the score reflects who you are. So for us in our institutions, the qualities that we value the most in our applicants are things like intellectual curiosity, your creativity, eagerness for learning, excitability, the passion. Again, these are not measured by test. So DJ earlier talked about the passion aspect. You can't fake passion. when you write it in an essay, and when you sit down and you chat with us in an interview, when you visit our campuses and we see in your eyes the sparkle about your love for dance, your love for art, your love for social justice, that happens and that matters to us. So again, those things cannot be measured within a test exam. So as DJ said earlier, we have plenty of information, and Ken as well, plenty of information to make a decision on your admissibility, from your essay, your recommendation letters, your transcript, to things that you've just done that are extremely you. You're the only person that's qualified to write your essay, to be in the classes that you take. So let's get to some other questions here. Remember, it is an option, but do the test scores tell me something that the rest of your application will not? So think of it that way. Do these scores, what does the score mean? Sometimes students will say, well, is there a magic number? Should I submit these scores, or shouldn't I submit these scores? I mean, does the score, if you choose to submit it, reflect your abilities? There's not a magic number. There's not a particular result. If it's below 20's 8 or 9, or it's above something else, it's not about that. It's if you feel that it reflects who you are, how you learn. And we can talk all day long about, the biases that are created from a socioeconomic status, from some type of cultural perspective. So without even going there, we're clearly letting you know that we have enough information within your application to make that type of decision. So then the last thing that I'll go to, are you more than just a score? Sometimes we as society, and I put myself in this category as an admission leader, we put so much pressure and so much stress on students and school counselors about scores, about these things, and we forget, do you like learning? Are you excited about education? Well, what's your test score? How'd you do? So are you more than the score? I'll tell a story about my first year working at Knox College back in 2008. I was on the road. I was in New Mexico. I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This young woman was talking with me about an experience that she had on a college campus. And so she said, I went to this college campus and I sat down and I chatted with an admission officer. And they, said, well, hey, good to see you. And they say, oh, we noticed in your profile that you scored in the top 98 percentile of your test score. She had taken the ACT and scored a 35. And so the admission counselor said, well, we see that in your profile, you're going to be one of our top students, and you're probably going to get a full tuition scholarship. And then immediately the young woman, she felt sad. She felt like, wow, they just see a number. They don't know anything about me. They don't know that I'm passionate about all these different types of things. I didn't have any opportunity. I didn't have any time to tell them who I was, but because they saw a score, I was going to get a full tuition scholarship. So again, for some students, that's their dream. Absolutely. You give me the full tuition scholarship. You don't have to ask me who I am. But for most people, we're more than just the score. And so I tell that story by saying this: whether you have the high score or a low score, in your perspective, you're still that person that has passion. You're still that person that loves to read, that loves to write, that's excited about education, that does lots of types of things. So again, you're more than a score. And so that's my portion of it. Sorry it wasn't as lengthy as some of the others, but hopefully you enjoyed the story. So let's turn it over to Quentin so we can learn about the future of standardized test scores.
Absolutely. And I'll try to be even briefer than you, Devon, as I wanted to make sure certain information was represented visually in addition to what I'm sharing and talking. But again, should you submit your scores, we absolutely think you should be in the driver's seat and be strategic. Curate a list of colleges and universities that you're passionate about, that you actually would like to attend. Hopefully that list doesn't mirror 1 through 20 of any of the popular college and university and world rankings. Hopefully that list includes what your personal 1 through 20 is of schools, again, that you can see yourself growing at, thriving at, being a part of the community, being challenged. And when you think about the best way, and DJ pointed at this earlier, the best way to leverage your application, you're looking at schools at a range of selectivity, looking at the requirements. And if you feel from your research, and again, from your sort of ethical point of view, that you're putting yourself in the best position by sharing your scores or not, then make that decision based off of that. So certainly you being strategic is absolutely not just welcome, but that's my expectation of you, just to be smart about your college search. And then, when we talk about what we're doing as an industry, many institutions, we want to again reiterate, have gone test optional or even test blind in some instances prior to the pandemic. So this isn't just a response and reaction to the pandemic. And I want to make sure that that's illuminated. There is fantastic research that's been out for quite some time that talks about the statistical predictive value of students succeeding and excelling academically and being successful. And based on that research, many institutions made these decisions. And some, again, when we think about the access piece of it, which has been exacerbated certainly by the pandemic, access to actually taking tests, being able to retest, being able to prepare with adequate amounts of time, taking the test in conditions that are reasonable. Then other institutions have gotten on board as a result of the access piece of it, and I applaud those as well. I also want to put a definition in there about test blind institutions, blind being the scientific research, actual experimental reference. When we talk about using a test list or a test blind admission policy, that is where an institution will review and make a decision on your application without giving you the option of submitting your standardized test scores. In our instance, Northern Illinois University made this decision January 2020, actually before the pandemic reared up, based off of research. We found that the standardized tests were not significant predictors of student academic achievement, good standing, persistence, graduation. So we made the decision to remove it in the process because it had no value in that utilization. And it's one thing to say a tool is bad versus a tool maybe doesn't have the most appropriate application for an institution. So for us, we didn't call standardized tests bad. We just said in this particular application, which is the admission process, merit scholarship selection process, and selection to the honors program, we felt like the application, well, we didn't just even feel. The data clearly compelled us to see that the application of standardized test scores to those processes was not a good application of the tool. So let's get out of the good, bad conversation and just say, don't use that tool that way, okay? So with that being said, the future of standardized test scores, I bring you good news on behalf of colleges and universities throughout the country. You will have plenty of options. If you are a high school senior or junior, you will have plenty of options to choose from as relates to colleges and universities that will give you the option or may not even consider your standardized test. Again, you can read this, but I'll say it out loud. Over 59 colleges and universities are test blind and will not evaluate or give you the opportunity to even submit your test scores. And if that is something that's a challenge for you and you want your scores to be considered, if you want the option to submit your scores, then again, that's a decision that you want to make in an informed way, knowing that some schools are test blind. 57 have made that decision since February as relates to colleges that are test optional and test blind combined now in a single category. 2/3 of all U.S. colleges that offer bachelor's degrees, that is, are actually accepting and implementing and utilizing test blind and or the slide should say test optional policies for fall 2021. Now I want you to think about this. Over the last 6 months, over 500 schools have announced that they're going to utilize these policies. Some have said we'll do it for a certain period of time, a year, 2 years, 3 years. Some have said indefinitely, and they haven't put a time limit. But again, just thinking about the ongoing analysis, many institutions have awarded scholarship without the standardized test score. And just from our purposes, we will study and research the trends that come out of implementing these policies. And if scholarships are awarded and those are renewable, those students will be on our campuses 4 or 5 years. So we'll be studying those trends over time because we're not just interested in those students returning to the second year. We want to see the rate that they graduate and see how they are performing as relates to good academic standing and how they're performing in the context of various majors. And are they going off to undergraduate research? Are they in achieving honors awards, while they're on our campuses? So for a considerable future, even institutions that maybe haven't made a permanent decision, they need a sample size of information to study and evaluate if this is something to continue. And you can't just do that with a sample size of a year. So I'm taking a little bit of a liberty to speak on behalf of other colleges and universities, but I know great colleagues at a range and a large volume of institutions, and I know they're going to do considerable research, and that research will go beyond a year. So I just want to comfort you students and parents to know that you're going to have a great range of options, not only because of the large list of schools that have indefinitely implemented these policies, but even those that maybe have a limit. There's going to be some analysis and research that must extend out to several years for an institution to have the kind of information to give it confidence to make a permanent stance or adjustment or tweaks to the process. And I think that's something that certainly benefits you as students and parents, and hopefully Generation Z, that allows you all to take a deep breath and let go of some of that anxiety. You are going to have very, very great options and a range of them geographically, within ranges of selectivity, within ranges of academic offerings. And I'm certainly excited to report that. But as I always say, and I'll transition to my colleague so we can bring this thing home, I want you to look at the information for yourself. So look at this presentation. I did include the data source. Go to fairtest.org, as it has, in my opinion, the most comprehensive list of test optional and test blind schools out there. So I want you to do your own research and see which institutions are listed on that particular site. It's pretty comprehensive and thorough.
Before we go, I know there was a question that Mike had asked about, and I'll read it here. Wondering if you receive an ACT score from students, just curious if you would adjust score requirements or expectations knowing that students wearing masks may perform differently when taking the test. For example, would an ACT of 25 with a mask be the equivalent of 26 without a mask? Mike, I got to tell you, congratulations. That is the first time I've ever heard that take on a question. That's awesome. I don't know if, let me go to the kernel of the question, which is, are schools going to be adjusting score requirements or expectations? I think we're all adjusting our expectations this year. Recognizing that walking in to take a test, a standardized test under any circumstance is an unnatural experience. Doing so with a mask is even more unnatural. All the more reason why, let's go back to the initial concept of test optional, test blind. If you don't think a test is going to help you in your admission process, and in most cases, it's probably not, then there are colleges that are saying, even those that are test optional, don't take the test. Don't take the test. If you think there is anything that a college needs to know about the circumstances of your application, whether it's how you took a standardized test or what your learning experience has been like or hasn't been like, since going to a digital experience, or maybe all of your classes are pass-fail instead of graded. If you think there's anything we need to know, you can let us know on the application. A lot of times students think, well, if I do that, I'm just making excuses for myself. No, I mean, all four of us, very imaginative people, and we're going to come up with some sort of spectacular story if you don't actually tell us what the real story is. So always control the narrative and give us the full context so we can make a decision. None of us got into this line of work because we like saying no to people. We actually do this because we love working with students and helping them discover colleges that match well with their talents and aspirations. So give us a shot. I will also leave you with this piece of information too, which is, and since I'm not going to make you answer this, but of those 2,300 colleges that Quentin listed before, 85% of those schools admit more than half of their applicants. In fact, the national average acceptance rate, I think DJ said something, alluded to this earlier, national acceptance rate, according to the National Association of College Admission Counselors, which is what we're all a member of. It's people who are professional college admission counselors, but also school-based counselors in secondary schools. They reported that the average was 62%, 62 or 65% was the average acceptance rate across the country. The problem is most of the stories we hear about college admission tend to focus on the most selective colleges in the country, and you can name them all, and chances are pretty good. They are ones that admit, in fact, I will say, I think there are 17 schools, according to the Pew Research Foundation, 17 schools admit fewer than 10% of their applicants. And nearly all of those are the ones that we read about in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or blog posts about the people who got shut out at all their top schools. But if you look through that fair test list, you're going to see colleges, maybe square that up with your own research if you're using College Board's Big Future, or you're using CAPEX, or you're using any other of the tools out there to help find a school that matches with you. Take a look at what their test score policy is this year, and you're going to find some really good opportunities for you. I think we would all say this is a year where there are going to be a lot of headaches. We hope that this session has been a bit of a preemptive aspirin for all of you. I see Devon wants to jump in and take a shot at answering Mike's question as well. Is that true? Go for it, Devon.
No, I was actually just trying to dismiss it from our list.
Oh, right on. Okay.
We have 2 minutes left, by the way.
Yeah, let's open it up. If anybody has, hey, Megan, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, please.
I don't specifically have any questions in the Q&A, but I went to an institution that did not require test optional schools. So for those individuals, when I was in high school as well, maybe the individuals join us, how will we know if that will stay continuing on? So Quentin, you talked about this, that institutions are keeping it only for this upcoming academic year, for the fall of 2021, but for the institutions that have kept it on for multiple years, how will students find that information?
Absolutely. So definitely go directly to those institutions. There's a large number that have made permanent decisions. So I'll tell you the number of institutions that have made permanent decisions outnumbers the number of institutions that have made temporary decisions. But with all things related to admission, and especially as you're researching institutions and trying to meet dates, deadlines, and requirements, go to them directly. If you're interested in a school, the best source isn't necessarily a third-party website. Go to that institution, ask the question. They're going to love to hear from you. They'll offer you more than what you asked for. And there's all sorts of kind, warm, friendly people who care about your success, and they will help you with information that I guarantee may even lead you to finding another institution that's a better fit. All of us are interested in your success, and we certainly can be helpful if you contact us directly. We love to hear from you, students.
Yes, and then one other question that we get here at ISAC is how, because your institutions have gone test optional or test blind, and Northern's case is, how does that affect your merit-based scholarships, especially as institutions move forward in the next year or so for the next fall? So how will that affect there's merit-based scholarships that they've offered that have looked at GPA and the SAT or ACT scores, but now will, if they've gone test optional, how will it affect that?
Maybe we'll start in reverse order. We are test blind completely, so all of our merit scholarships will be awarded without considering any standardized test score.
Same here, same here. And quite frankly, we haven't used the test scores in our calculation for scholarships in a number of years. And so, so even for the students that have submitted their test scores, it hasn't been a factor. And so again, we're not going to penalize a student for that.
And this is DJ. The scores are only used to benefit the student, not to impact the student should the student use their scores. So we are basically looking at giving the student the best scholarship opportunity based on what they present in their application. So any detractor wouldn't be considered. That would take their scholarship down or put them in the category where they wouldn't get a scholarship.
Same.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for a great session. And attendees, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The session was recorded, so know that if you want to come back to anything any of the gentlemen said today or their contact information, know that you can find it on the IACAC website. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your insights and your great level of expertise, definitely, since you all are at the very top levels, most of you at your schools. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, guys.
Thank you. Good luck.
Bye, everybody. Pleasure.
Vote. Go out and vote.